They said it was impossible. They said, you can't put together the most elite team of comic book reviewers on the planet and do, a podcast or something like that? Despite all that, today we can proudly announce. Yeah, they were right. We couldn't do it. So instead, we brought you the most vile, ignorant, unprofessional group of comic book enthusiasts we could find. This is Panel to Panel, the Game Rage Magazine comic podcast. That is correct. We are now here for the newest episode of Panel to Panel. This is going to be discussing Powers of X, issue number 1. My name's Josh. I'm here today with Adam. And before we get into that, in case anybody was wondering, if you want to hear this podcast and more, you can go to GameRageMagazine.com and you'll hear about Anime Syndicate, All Gas No Trash, our music podcast. You can hear the Buttfuck Nowhere Show, an irreverent take on normal life and Game Rage meta things. You can also hear Central Unintelligence Podcast, where we talk about political events and world things and news and stuff. And also Chirping from the Pine, the Game Rage Sports Podcast. We have the Game Rage Wrestling Podcast, and we also have what's the other one? This one's Panel to Panel. Team Killing Glitch Charge, which is the video game one, and also Without Censor, the Game Rage Interview Podcast. Goddamn, these assholes have a lot of podcasts. I'm glad I'm getting paid by the word for this, because these motherfuckers are just getting deeper in debt, paying me to say this stuff. All right.
Rob's daddy is a stapler.
You can listen to the Game Rage Stapler Podcast. That should be the name of the meme podcast, the Game Rage Stapler Podcast.
Game Rage Stapler Podcast. It would be good because it kind of throws off like what it actually means.
Oh yeah. That's why it's funny.
It's like we did the fucking Game Rage Burger Podcast and it was about memes.
Oh man, yeah, that'd be great. Hey, wait, your mic's not going.
Oh shit. Hello, testing.
No, it's yeah, there you go. All right, now it's in.
Testing 1 2 3.
Yep, there you go. All right. So if you like those things and more, you can go to GameRageMagazine.com. And if you like the old social media things, you can go to Instagram and TikTok at Game Rage Magazine. You can also go to @GameRageMag on Twitter/X. And if you want to hear about all the musical musings of Adam's good old music time, you can go to All Gas No Trash Official on the Instagram. And also, there's some spicy memes as well.
Can I ask you why you ended up doing that voice?
I don't know. I just felt it. I just felt it.
All right.
So yeah, you can go there and do that. And honestly, once I did it, it was funny. But then 3 or 4 podcast names in it became not funny. But I felt like I already committed to it, so I couldn't stop. At least until I finished the promo.
Yeah.
So I probably won't do that next time. But
I don't know why, but just on the subject of talking about, I've been trying to get around to playing video games like a little bit more often because I do want to play Helldivers, but I also know what a time suck it could be.
It's such a time suck.
It just pulls away from all this, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know why, but I've been trying to create this persona.
Oh man.
For Helldivers. I don't know what his name is going to be, but
You think he's going to talk like that?
No, you're not going to talk like that. Probably sounds more like Beetlejuice.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
Hey, did you take my fucking gear, you son of a bitch?
Yeah, so it's somewhere between Beetlejuice and the fire bat from fucking StarCraft. I don't know why, dude. My mind, that's where my mind goes for Helldivers, is if I was going to create a character and stay in persona for Twitch streams, doing that shit, that's where my mind goes. But yeah.
I've got 2. It's either going to be that one, well, maybe 3. That guy, which I guess a real spinoff of that is the 1920s. It's 1920s and out, guy. That's a little different than what I just did. But then the third one, and probably best one, is going to be The American meme crusted chodes, daddy. We gonna kill us some Terminids today, baby. Those little bugs ain't gonna have no idea what happening because we got a lot of stems in this body. That's the only thing going down in this body is we got some stems, we got some electrical things, and an occasional lady of the evening.
I would even argue that the third, so it's somewhere between a fire bat, Beetlejuice, and that guy that would sit on his couch. The guy, he was on the Drew Carey show.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, what would you do? 2 chicks at the same time. Yeah. But shit. Maybe when we're well enough off, we get our first dollar at Game Rage Mag. Well, actually, technically we have with the Millennial Frog.
That's correct.
But let's say we get a Patreon going and we're able to commit a little more time to things that we could provide you. I mean, shit, I would love to stream and just do a character for Helldivers 2.
Man, that might be kind of fun. And then also maybe that's something we could pursue for an exclusive for people who would subscribe to the Patreon is you can only see our hilarious Helldiver antics on Patreon.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's maybe we get a red versus blue thing going on Helldivers where we stream, but we also capture the video so we can put it on.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And create like a storyline out of scenarios that we're in.
Yeah,
But that are actually tied to the game, like
right.
with the plants get taken over by the automatons or whatever, because that's been happening
Yeah,
pretty frequently as of late.
That is true.
Anyways,
anyway, but yeah, you can go listen to Team Killing Glitch Charge if you want. We'll have this conversation later on Team Killing Glitch Charge, maybe one of the next episodes. But anyways, today the matter at hand, Powers of X issue number 1. Now this is part of the House of X, Powers of X intertwined series.
Yeah, so the overarching thing, I guess, would be Dawn of X.
Oh, okay.
Like a new beginning for the X-Men, right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember when the series both series started. I think maybe in 2019.
I think I'm having a rough memory of when both these things started, but we'll say it's around that time. So these are 2 books that are happening concurrently. House of X being the book that's happening in the present, and Powers of X being possible scenarios of what unfolds for the X-Men in the Powers of X, like in a very mathematical sense.
Yeah.
So X1 is year 1 for the X-Men. X100 or X to the second power is 100 years in the future. X to the third power is 1,000 years.
Oh, okay.
So that's what it's a very fucking weird. It's not supposed to be in an insulting manner. It's just this is how Jonathan Hickman works. He just thinks very elaboratively on a 4D brain level to tell the current story of the X-Men within House of X, but also to talk about what happens to the X-Men in the future in 100 years, 1,000 years, the beginning of the X-Men. It's very crazy stuff. It's a lot to take in, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like it is a lot of crazy, intricate storylines going on here, which, hey, listen, I'm all in favor of. This is just going to be great. I'm excited for it. So here we are, episode, well, it's not episode, but I don't know what number of episode this is, but Powers of X, we're getting into it. Issue number 1. Yeah. And we start with the opening of the cover. And we got, characters on here that I don't know who any of these assholes are. I mean, I assume this might be Charles. Yeah, bald guy, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's Moira Taggart, who is, I think, was recently announced to be an X-Men for this particular continuity.
Yeah.
So she has had 10 or 11 different lives. And it was...
Hey, pull the mic closer in front of your mouth. Real quick.
Testing?
Like, no, pull it in front of your mouth more, because, like, it's not...
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Have I had it going?
Yeah, it's going fine, but it's just, you were, like, lower. It was, like, not picking you up all the way, so I think it was too far, but all right, go ahead.
All right, so
now you're good.
Talking about Moira Taggart, she's been in X-Men continuity for some time, and it was said that in different timelines she was supposed to help the X-Men to get to the reality in which the X-Men, or not just X-Men, but the mutant race to a time of prosperity where they're able to live as any.
That's who this chick is.
Yes.
Okay.
But it was said that in her 10th life that if she doesn't get the scenario right where the X-Men are able to prosper, then there's no future for the X-Men.
Oh, okay.
So she has to get it right in House of X. She has to get it right in this time.
Right. Okay.
But what we see here is the future of the Sentinel technology, the gentleman that has I don't know what kind of
flames or smoke. I don't know what that is, but
the cone shape, the cylindrical cone shape. It looks like a Nimrod or a Nimrod Sentinel or whatever the fuck it is. And then you have this character in the front whose name escapes me currently, but she's something of a hybrid between, I think, Colossus, Magic, who has a sword similar to her. There's these hybrid mutants that were talked about in House of X. In order for the mutant race to prosper, they started mixing mutant DNA so that one person could have possibly 2 or 3 powers. But as we come to find out, it actually creates there's like a degradation over each generation, because at least 50% or more end up becoming retaliatory or traitors.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, we'll get to that. So yeah, this is a really cool cover by RB Silva, who's another great artist that is working in conjunction with Pepe Larraz, who's doing House of X, but just really great colors. I don't know what else to add. But
yeah, the layout to me, this is a very Star Wars-esque, on its scale of epicness and the way it's kind of laid out. This is like those original kind of like the where it's got all the characters in there and stuff, and like especially this chick with this. I mean, I'm assuming this is just a regular ass sword, but it looks kind of like a lightsaber almost with the way it's shining in the light and everything. So it's kind of cool, like the way that they laid this out.
Yeah, I mean, that has happened in Star Wars where there's a lightsaber and there's 2 or 3 figures that are
around
looking,
it.
Looking in opposite directions. But then this motherfucker that looks like possibly Nightcrawler.
Yeah, right here, this guy.
And they actually talk about these 2 characters in pretty good detail, because there is some interesting info that is disseminated in the coming pages. So let's go ahead and get rocking.
Let's go ahead and get right into it. There it goes. So opening up, here's the thing, Charles. It's not a dream if it's real. And that was that character.
Moira McTaggart. Yeah, she's I think she's alluding to Xavier's dream of humans and mutants prospering and possibly coexisting with humanity, right?
Yeah.
And here we have the first panel, which is X0, which is the year 1 for X-Men, the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then we get to X1, year 10, which is the beginning of the Krakoa era, which is the prosperous time for the X-Men. And then it shows us X to the second power, the X-Men, year 100, the war, alluding to the fact, and it's not Xavier, but rather this Sentinel, this futuristic Sentinel that possibly has taken over the, I guess, Marvel universe, or whatever you want to call it. And then we have X to the third, the X-Men, year 1000, the Ascension, and we have another bald figure that might be alluding to some type of Xavier. I don't know what the fuck it is. Yeah.
I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like what they're alluding to is this is either the leader of the X-Men or whatever throughout these times. It could also be Xavier, because he's a psychic power, or the most powerful psychic or whatever, right? So like maybe he's transferred, maybe this is him. Maybe he's evolving or whatever, and he turned into this fucking machine robot. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
I mean, if anything, or at least the conclusion that I came to was that these are the figures at the forefront of what happens in each. And I think, judging by the fact that in X2, X to the second power, year 100, that possibly the Sentinels have taken over. And
yeah. Well, if you look at, okay, so if you look at, it's like the first one's gold, the dream. Blue is like the world where they're kind of in charge. Red is the background for this one of the war, meaning like, oh, they kind of won.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to like this, the whole galaxy's in his, they've ascended or whatever. So this is like their evolution form. I don't know.
Yeah.
Of what mutants have become, maybe.
Yeah. And I think it talks about it in later pages. So let's go ahead and get to the next page. So here we have X to the 0 power, which is year 1 for the X-Men. And this is the scenario in which Charles Xavier is going through this open market, or this
Like a festival kind of thing.
or rather, yeah, a festival. And this is where he meets Moira McTaggart. So she introduces herself, and let's go ahead and get to the next page. So they have a conversation, and she introduces herself, and I guess we could just read some of the excerpts from the conversation if you want to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so he basically tells her, she's like, oh, hey, good afternoon. And he's like, oh, yes. And, they trade pleasantries at the beginning, right? And she's basically saying, like, what he's asking her, hey, are you having a good time, essentially? And she's like, yeah, it seems like something I should be enjoying. And, yet I'm just kind of like looking at everybody, and this is for show. It's for show for people who need it. This is a distraction from the real shit that's going on. And then she's like, oh, hey, can I sit? And he's like, oh, yeah, go ahead. And then so she asks him the same question, and he's like, oh, yeah, I am. He's like, seems like this type of thing that I shouldn't enjoy, but yet here I am. And then she's like, oh, hey, so I'm assuming, or no, he says, it's a sunshine in the bleakness, essentially, is what he says that this is. And everything seems good now. And then she's like, oh, man, must be having a pretty good day. And he's like, oh, am I being that obvious? And she's like, oh, you have to be blind not to see that shit. And then she's kind of basically just saying, I was just kind of walking through, saw some of these things. This seems like it's a, what do you want to call it? Not maybe like an outdoor circus, or one of those like carny things that comes to town, like a carnival. There you go. Kind of one of those type of things. And she's like, oh, I saw this, I saw that. Talking about the fortune teller.
Yeah, I want to go up because what she says, in my case, I was just walking through the fair past the caged beast and the games of chance, past the fortune teller selling his wares. And how do you feel about this? But the phrasing about caged beasts, because this ends up happening on one of the last pages of the book, talking about the mutants. And there is a lot of realities in which the mutants don't have a favorable future. And at the end of this fucking book, that is quite evidently the case. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Just them talking about caged beasts and the foretellings of this fortune teller, because we get 3 different descriptions of what this fortune teller talked about.
Yeah, and I feel like they're alluding to essentially, obviously, what's going to happen. The magician, the metal metamorph, the great sword, and the girl with the 1 foot in 2 worlds, which this is clearly the chick on the cover talking about her. Then we got, see the tower, the axis, the pillar of collapse and rebirth, the monolith of ascension. So it's like, this is when the fucking robots take, or the Sentinels take over, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we see the devil, the red god, and the lost cardinal of the last religion. And this is that Nightcrawler, this red Nightcrawler fella, being the devil, essentially. And then she says, at the far end of the fair, I see you sitting here. And I thought, there he is, the guy I've been looking for. The strong man. And he's like, well, that's not really, I'm not really that. And she's like, wonder why is he sitting there under the parted skies and the brilliant sun? Why was the strong man smiling so? He said, I was, huh? She says, yeah. He says, you want to know why? She says, oh, yes, very much. I was smiling because I have recently had the most wonderful dream of a better world and my place in it. And that's where she's like, well, here's the thing, Charles. It's not a dream if it's real.
Yes, and this is a very interesting bit of dialogue because I assume on the next page we get Charles Xavier looking into the mind of Moira, and Moira has knowledge and experiences from all her past lives. So when she reads the mind of Charles Xavier, or vice versa, that Charles Xavier looks into Moira's mind, he's like, holy shit, she already knows me and she knows what's going to happen to us. So potentially she could help us get to where we need to and avoid all the problematic things that potentially could happen along the way. But yeah, go ahead.
Right, yeah, that's exactly what it does. He reads your mind and he's like, hey, wait a minute, do we know each other? And she's like, oh yeah, quite well. And that's when he's like, he asks her like, who are you? And she's like, oh yeah, just go ahead. Just, you know what to do. Read my mind. Just see it. And he's like, oh shit. Like that's the end panel of the page. Is just, he's like, oh.
Yeah. Can we go back for a second?
Oh yeah.
I think this is a very good storytelling in terms of visuals, because it's very subtle that in the very beginning of the first panel, which is just a kind of concentration on Charles Xavier's face that was maybe in a neutral, well, I guess you could maybe say pensive or in a contemplative state.
Yeah. And
she too is in a contemplative state, and it progresses a little bit. And then by the end of it, he's in total astonishment. Pretty good storytelling as far as just nonverbal communication.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that's really cool that they did that. And then the color, like the colorings of the background, like his is just white. And then at the end, it's like this rose pink color.
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh shit. Like he figured something out, you know, he sees in color now, you know, or whatever.
And she's still like in a stalwart, still kind of a stone faced expression, and maybe possibly saying that this is legit. Like all the memories that you're just unlocking right now, or every experience that you have embedded in you because of your psychic powers, like all that shit's real, and we do know each other and all that shit. So anyways.
You know what's crazy? Her face right here looks like that fucking face of that person in the Ascension. Like the way the whole face structure is set up, like she looks like the blue alien guy or whatever. Her face structure looks like that.
Yeah, Karima or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget her name, but
interesting.
Yeah,
that's just very interesting.
All right, so this is just the
what is this, like the
credits page? Yeah.
All right, so let me get back to X1, the X-Men year 10.
So in some regard, Powers of X is also happening concurrently with what's happening in House of X, but you're only getting pieces of it.
Yeah.
This book is showing the different scenarios in different years of what's happening with the X-Men. But here's a glimpse of what's happening with the X-Men in
year 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And what's crazy too is that whole name Powers of X, right? Like it's cool because it's like this is the literal powers of X, like you said.
Mathematically, yes.
Yeah, how they're doing it. That's kind of a cool fucking way to do this. Yeah. Anyway, so it's back on Krakoa, and it's fucking, who is this? Rogue? Or Mystique? There you go. Fuck, I get them fucking bitches confused. Mystique, she's got this. Oh, that was from the last issue. That thing, that little that DVD or that USB drive that Sabretooth got, and he got captured or whatever.
Right.
So she's here on Krakoa with the thing. She just came through one of these portals. And they're now at the House of M, which is obviously Magneto's, lair or whatever they're calling it.
And also a reference to the House of M event itself. So kind of a cool little reference to the past.
Yeah, and I'm someone off screen, I'm assuming it's Magneto, which it is. He's like, oh, hey, you're back. Cool. And so he's basically just asking her about like, oh, have you seen the effect we're having or this place is having on everything? And he's like, it's just overnight. It just seems like it's just been this big spring of hope, essentially. And he's basically saying how even him, like the guy who lived through the Holocaust, basically, and the actual Holocaust, the mutant Holocaust, like all the different fucking things that he has no reason. He should have all the skepticism in the world. He says, man, this idea has just infected me. And so he's like, damn, am I dreaming of success? Like, do I dare dream it? And she literally just brings his ass back to, we lost Sabretooth. He didn't do us any favors. We killed a bunch of guards. He's a bitch.
And Mystique has always been somebody that has had her reservations about shit, about Charles and Eric Lenzer.
Yeah. And so
she's only doing what's best for her. And at the moment, yes, it is serving.
All right.
Is it working?
Yeah, you're good now. Good.
Uh,
I feel like the thing was pulling on it because it was angled. All right, try now.
testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you're good. All right.
Mystique is very self-serving to this point because she's been burned by other people and having that type of optimism or adopting some school of thought that has led her to be burned multiple times. So now she just mostly serves herself. And yes, maybe currently she's in the service of Krakoa, but that doesn't mean necessarily it's gonna stay that way.
Yeah, basically. But so then she just tells him, I got what you're asking for. All right, I got the goods. And she's gonna give it to him, and she says, "But I have demands." Oh, here we go. Now here it is. And he's like, "Oh yeah, do you? Is helping your fellow mutant not enough reward?" And then she says, "Nah, it ain't." And then Xavier's comes out all fucking baller with his helmet and, you know, this black jumpsuit or whatever. And he says, "Oh, I see that." And she says, "Oh, I need more." And he says, "Yeah, I see that, but it's fair, I guess. You know, we have further demands of you as well. So it's not that, yeah, you need more, but hey, guess what? So do we. We need more out of you." So she's like, "Oh, fuck, really? I'm afraid so. Good lady." And so, and then she throws it back at him. "Oh, it's helping your fellow mutant not enough for the great Charles Xavier?" And then he just tells her, "We're building a better mutant world, Mystique, and everyone who would live in it owes something." So implying that if we want this to work, everyone has to participate. This is mutant communism. All right. Mutant communism has been established. Everyone must work for the greater good of the cause of the mutants.
Yeah, it's a tough sell for, Mystique. I think it'd be a tough sell for a lot of mutants to say, "Oh, we're putting all our faith in Charles Xavier to make this happen." But even I think maybe the turning point would be having Magneto even play into this as well.
Yeah.
If he's in, then shit, like maybe we need to be on all. Maybe we need to be all in if everybody's on board, especially those two for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So the next page is the Stan soapbox thing again, which this is the same exact one that was in the last issue. So we're not.
Yeah, not worth reading.
We're not even going to talk about it because we already did in the last issue. Then we get into X2, the X-Men Year 100, or X to the second power, I should say.
Yeah.
And we're seeing someone saying that there was a dream. Our dreams are the same. While you slept, the world changed. And this goes back to that thing that they said in the last issue in the House of X, #1.
Right.
About, hey, humanity, the world changed while you were asleep. And so it says they're in the northern territory of the Nexus. And there's I'm presuming it's a female subject that's like some kind of robot lady. Or
yeah, so I think what ends up happening in X to the second power is that humanity, I don't know how exactly to word it, but it ends up playing in the favor of the Sentinels, where there's been a negotiation between humans and the Sentinels, so they become in some way enhanced by these technological advancements, right?
Yeah.
And they both hate mutants, or they want mutants eradicated. So their objective is mutually beneficial. So the Sentinels have given the humans technological advancements, but if we really had to put it in who's in charge, I would say it's the Sentinels, because you know, they're in a far better position to wipe out humans as well.
Right, yeah. And so she's saying about how this one that they're on is dying, which is assuming this is some kind of a mutant, I guess. And the Sentinel that's there with her, this advanced Sentinel, I guess is what we're calling it.
Yeah.
He's basically saying like, oh man, should I expect something salvageable or should I expect something more towards the human side of the spectrum? And she says, oh, bad news on that. And he's like, oh, great. And she says that they're wiping on termination now, some kind of trigger when they start to flatline. So like they're wiping their minds or whatever whenever they die. So that, because obviously they're going and they're collecting information out of them.
Yeah.
So this Sentinel says he's asking about the other mutant, and this lady says, "Oh, we know her. It's Silobel?
Syllable.
Man, that's a weird ass. Syllable was born in the kennel, and she's saying that she was basically a black brain telepath, basically a Judas to be input into the mutants to subvert and just be a spy essentially." And she said like, "Oh, this shit was written in her DNA. The normal protocols were sure to fail, so we got to give her a bath," is what she's referring to. And then, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so this character that's being introduced has probably exposed the mutants to these Sentinels, right? And by nature, she's technically with the mutants, and she's like, I'm with you guys, but it's because of her programming that she's ending up betraying them. But these are also her people, and she's kind of subverted their efforts, unfortunately, because of her own DNA with something she can't control. So it kind of sucks. But this Sentinel ends up becoming a multi-head Sentinel, which is fucking crazy because it's like you have all these voices because they're examining her and shit, and this Sentinel's fucking just laying into her, I suppose. But yeah, what you got?
Yes.
Is there anything to be extracted from this piece of dialogue?
Yeah, so I think that in this piece of dialogue, he's like he's talking to the human, and he's like, "Oh yeah, where's all that human ingenuity that you keep talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Let's not give up so easy." And so then he's asking the mutant basically like, "Hey, what were you guys doing in the next? What were you and your buddies doing rifling through the Nexus? And what did you get? And where did they go?" And the mutant's like, "Well, what friends? Man, I don't know what you're talking about. I never heard friends. I don't have no friends." Like, it's doing one of those. So then
she's going against her programming here,
right? And so the Sentinel says, "Oh, I see. You'll need some persuasion then." And then you see in the background emerges one of those giant old school Sentinels. Those
a little bit of an upgrade, but yeah, more of the traditional look that we'd come to expect.
Yeah, definitely an upgrade for sure. And then there's more mutants there with them.
So we get a back shot of the two characters that were introduced on the covers.
Yeah,
which is like the Colossus magic hybrid. So she's do they say what her character's name is?
I think they do.
Oh, it's Rasputin. Wait, she's right, Rasputin.
She's Rasputin, or is he Rasputin?
I think he's Rasputin. Yeah.
I think she says it
somewhere a little bit later.
No, is he? Who's Cardinal? Is that him then?
She's right, Rasputin. This is.
Oh yeah, so she's Rasputin and he's Cardinal because she says just because you were bred to be a coward doesn't make me one, Cardinal. She's talking to him.
Yeah, so I think in this part, because they do talk about it in one of those little exposition things, that some of the mutants have like a philosophy within them that's more pacifist, like Charles Xavier, and then there's one that's more proactive,
that's more violent, essentially,
which seems to be Rasputin, who is the one that's wielding a sword and such, and then the Nightcrawler-esque figure is the one that's the coward or whatever.
Right, yeah. And I think that they had mentioned that there was something about a failure rate. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And there was some of them that, like, they were bred to be, like, this was how they came out. Like, they just came out more pacifist, and that was, like, part of the failure of the, what's his name? Because that was his whole gene, Mr. Sinister's gene program.
Yeah.
Essentially, to make the mutants all, like, breed more or whatever.
Yeah.
So then, basically,
They're trying to rescue Syllable.
Yeah, they're trying to rescue her. And so this dude, fucking Cardinal, he's sitting there and he's planting this black seed of Krakoa, which is that thing that does the portal.
The nowhere space.
Yeah. So he says, hey, I'm going to plant this and I'll wait for you guys. But he's like, hopefully I can keep this open as long as I can. But he's like, if you don't come, then I'll see you when the world gets made again. Basically, he's saying like, yeah, when you, I'll see you in hell, bitch. Like, that's basically what he's saying.
Yeah.
And then she tells him, will you pray for me, priest? Because he must be some kind of religious figure.
Yeah.
And he says, oh yeah, my faith is boundless. I pray for all living things. And he says, and that's your fucking problem. That's what Rasputin tells him. And then she pulls out her big ass sword and she just jumps out. I mean, this is a really cool graphic right here of her jumping through this.
Yeah, it's a great pose. It's like her lunging and having the sword at the ready to possibly swing at the fucking these sentinels.
Strike at the heart of the sentinels. And then in the little thing at the bottom, she says she's saying to Cardinal, oh, you've forgotten that the machines have no soul.
Yeah, because just previously they were saying, oh, you pray for all things.
Right.
Yeah. And he's like, machines have no fucking souls.
And when she said that, I got a very Terminator esque vibe out of this whole thing. As in, like the mutants are basically fighting against these, like the Skynet, right? That's what like the Sentinels have become, and they're wiping the plague of mutants off of the face of the earth or whatever.
Which is weird because even like the Sentinels in the later pages, the king or whatever, he actually has a little bit of comedic side, which is odd to see from like something that's a robot or whatever. So they do have human elements, but it's more on the, what do you call it? Gallows or dark black humor.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But even then, like they too have a human element within them. And it is interesting.
Yeah. So then Rasputin here, she executes her pose and cuts the fucking up the
more advanced
the more advanced sentinel, just cuts him straight in half and just slices him. And she says, basically capitalizing on her previous statement of the machines having no souls, she says the humans lost theirs a long time ago as well.
Which is true because they have given up their humanity because you saw the character that ended up having all the gadgets and stuff.
Yeah.
That man and machine are now integrated. So they too gave up their humanity.
Yeah, everybody basically gave up their humanity to be more.
So even the mutants might be more human than humans.
Yeah, essentially at this point. So then she tells, oh, hey, little sister. So implying that they have some sort of a type of familial-esque relationship. And she says, oh, I want to go home. And she's like, well, let's do it. Let's get out of here. And she asks her how long that the gate is fully grown. And she says, oh, it's taking root, but not long. Just hold them off. And fucking Rasputin says, oh, I can hold them off. I was made to do that.
And she flexes like the Colossus power, which creates like
like the metal
armor around her flesh and stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Flexing it. And then so there's some humans they've got like submachine guns and they're just fucking blasting at her. And they're like, oh man, nothing's getting her. Either metal, which meaning like kinetic ammunition, or plasma ammunition. And so then this other dude over there on the side who that mask reminds me of fucking someone Deadshot or whatever.
Deadshot,
from the which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then he's like, oh, I'm calling back up. I'm gonna get me a tank. We're gonna get us a tank right here. And so just as he does that, the gate opens and she says, all right, we're getting the hell up out of here. And just as that happens, that this giant mechanical hand comes down on top of them. And Rasputin's just like holding it up. And she's like, oh, like she makes that little automatopoeia, that oof. And she takes the sword out and just fucking cuts that thing up. Destroys the hand. There's a giant kaboom noise on there. And it's the hand of that giant ass sentinel that we saw. That one that it's more advanced, but it's with that purple and blue color scheme that we're more likely akin to have seen. Or I guess it's dark purple and light purple really is what it is. So then he's blasting her. She's blocking it. Rasputin comes in, puts him in the little bubble. Like he's what, I don't know what that is. Some kind of like mind power or something.
I think, something's holding her captive. So they got her. The operation has failed.
Yeah, they couldn't save her. The enemy has her. And so they got her in some kind of fucking bubble. And they're like, oh, we're taking this motherfucker back. And so Rasputin's like, nope, can't handle that. So she just charges straight in. And it's cool the way they did this scene where they blurred out like half of it.
Yeah, it's like motion
so it's like
blur.
in motion. Yeah, that's really cool. And then also the background's blurred out. And then the stuff that's more flowing into the scene, it becomes unblurred, I guess, and more clear. It's pretty cool. And then we get to now Syllable is fully in this fucking thing. Capsule. And she's telling them to fuck off. She's telling them like, get out of here. Like,
yeah.
Don't wait for me. And Rasputin's like, nope, I will die here before I do. Like before I let you go. And she's like, no, come on, leave. And Rasputin has just been bombarded with all these humans, just tackled. Like they resort to just straight fucking physical fist fighting essentially. And they're just grabbing her. And she's yelling out, no. And then it cuts to the Sinister line.
Yeah.
And this is talking about the breeding program that we were kind of alluding to earlier.
Yeah.
And basically, when their population was so low or at crisis that they couldn't keep the numbers coming, they had this like evasion, relocation, confrontation cycle program that just made it impossible for them to fucking make more mutants, So Mr. Sinister created these breeding pits on Mars, and he basically became their chief mutant geneticist, which is funny to see that a villain has now, Magneto was a villain too, and he became in charge of this. So it's like all mutants got together. There was no good mutants or bad mutants anymore. Everybody's on the same team at this point, which is Team Mutant. And so he started, basically took the strategy of the Hound program and just basically interbred mutants with powers that were like detection, pursuit, deception, and he wanted mutants that had the aggressive military style traits. Like that's what he was looking for.
Yeah. So that's where we see Rasputin being more of the description of that she has more capable powers to be more combative, whereas the Cardinal fellow is more evasive, and I don't want to say he's a coward, but he is something of a coward.
Yeah, basically. And we get into this little thing at the end here that's a little asterisk that says, talking about these things called lost years. And it's saying that they're the lost years of mutant leadership followed the almost universal death or disappearance of senior leaders, and preceding the fall of Krakoa and Mars, many believed rampant rumors that the lost years were not accidental, but purposeful. And implying that obviously
there was some type of betrayal.
Something happened, and now Charles, Magneto, everybody was killed, or some fucking shit happened, and it led to the fall of Krakoa.
Yeah.
Then we get into this other page talking about the first generation of they called them, these mutants or whatever. And basically they were just, the first generation was just they were pure copies of a singular source, right? Basically they raised them until they were 16, and then they sent them to Krakoa to defend the mutant homeland. And that was that. Then on the second and third generations, they called them Chimera classes. And essentially the second Chimera generation gave mutants that had DNA composed of 2 separate X genes. So it gave mutants mostly predictable combined power sets from the source mutants that they used. Then going into the third generation of Chimera mutants, it gave them an amalgamation of up to 5 X genes. So they had a predictable failure rate. The third generation basically was successful against the man-machine supremacy, which is what obviously we're witnessing now. And they believed that this would be the turning point for them. But the fourth generation of the Sinister Mutants had some kind of systemic failure, and the entire batch, they were all Omega-based mutants.
Yeah, so we're talking Magneto, Storm, Iceman, Jean Grey level,
like weapon of mass destruction level mutants. They had the hive mind got corrupted, and it was discovered to be defective, and they had destroyed basically 40% of the remaining mutant population and caused the fall of Krakoa itself. So eventually these Omega mutants committed mass suicide, collapsing Mars, the Sinister Pits, and themselves into a fucking singularity, which is crazy.
Yeah, so there's like a degradation over each generation, and yes, they became more powerful to possibly combat the Sentinels and the humans, but they too were like ending up killing their own kind.
Yeah.
Which sucks because they were already low to begin with, so even their existence is becoming problematic to the mutants themselves. So Sinister really fucked them over.
Oh, yeah, he really did. And so they were saying about how the breeding program had an expectable failure rate. And so every generation had outliers, but the expectation that the failures would be controllable at worst and acceptable at best. So per generation, Generation 1 had a 0.3% failure rate, 2 was 1.2%, 3 was 9.4%, and Generation 4, the fucked up one that screwed them all, was 62.3%. So over half of them were failures. And so they were saying basically the failure rate was like Generation 3 had a 10% failure rate, where in spite of them being bred for war, the mutants developed passive peacetime power sets.
So that's where their school of thought goes from like what Magneto was doing to more what is akin to maybe the schoolings of Xavier.
Yeah, and it says and this is specifically talking about Cardinal, basically about saying how most of these outlier mutants, they had personality profiles that matched more with pacifism and an obsession with the creation myths, which is why she calls them priests, which is why he talks about the faith and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They also didn't want names, and basically it says these variants were all called Cardinals. So everyone who was a third generation mutant that was basically a failure was called Cardinal. That was their name.
Yeah, so they're like, not to say they're a singular entity, but they're indistinguishable amongst themselves because they're all titled Cardinal.
Right, yeah. And so then we get into this part about betrayal, which is the whole fall of Krakoa and the destruction of the Martian breeding pits. They're saying that the mutants were all betrayed by Mr. Sinister, that he basically fucked them over in the end. And it was basically, it was obvious that he was playing the long game of self-interest that didn't have anything to do with the mutants, and he gave no fucks about essentially them as a people. So the failings of the Generation 4 mutants were a design flaw that was just baked into their design. It's believed that most of the random circumstances that led to the creation of Sinister's program were in fact orchestrated by him. So
even with this thing potentially supposed to being a safeguard to protect the mutant race, it actually was a long con from Mr. Sinister for reasons we don't know exactly.
Yeah, and it basically says Sinister was publicly executed by the man-machine supremacy after he defected to their side. So after he basically ruined the mutants and defected to their cause, they fucking publicly executed him. Fucking great. Genius.
Yeah.
So now we get into the Tower of Nimrod the Lesser, the human machine monolith, which this is basically an exact copy of that card from this tower looks exactly the same from that card, the tower that we saw at the beginning or the earlier
the
issues,
fortune-telling.
The fortune-telling thing. So this is like that scene. And now we see what I'm assuming is Nimrod the Lesser sitting in this throne room, I guess.
Yeah.
They bring Syllable. Wait, this is Syllable, right? They bring her?
The one with the black brain.
So he's talking to Omega, telling her, "Oh, it looks like your faith in humanity has paid off once again. They come bearing gifts."
And I believe this is Karima from the House of X, the human slash Sentinel hybrid.
Mm-hmm. This one,
yeah, because she was addressed as Omega, or her title, her description. Because you remember that page in House of X where they were talking about some of the figures within Orcus.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's her, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong, but I think that is actually her. So she's actually survived 100 years into the future. Or this is X to the second power, I think.
Right, yeah. And so then the humans are bowing down and they're just saying like, "Oh, we seek an audience of the great Nimrod and we need your counsel." And he basically tells them, there's no need for formalities. We're buddies. We're friends. We're all equals of some sort. And you guys are always welcome. Yeah.
There is a little bit of condescension or a bit of like a equals of some kind.
He says we're allies. Equals of a kind of. Yeah.
But in reality, it's like, machines are in charge.
Yeah, we're running the show. So she says basically we found that there were as many as 4 mutants that got into the Nexus and accessed the mainframe. We don't know how. We don't know why. We don't know any of this stuff. But one got out, one died, and we captured this one. So she's saying that she once was a hound, basically. And
this is referring to the mutants that have the Omega level threat powers. So these are the more aggressive ones.
Yeah. And,
proactive ones.
Right. And so she's saying that it's This one was from the Salsen Kennel. It's the last strain of mutant produced through our breeding program. So he's like, oh, a hound, I see. He's like, give me your eyes, mutant. I want you to look at me when I say this. And so that's Nimrod saying this. And then he gets up and says, I am so sorry for what we did to you. And he's basically apologizing that he's embarrassed. And he's like, we just did this because we wanted to expedite the annihilation of mutants. And instead, we bred you to be a slave, not only be a slave, but to betray your own kind. And man, in a good and just world of higher functioning programs like us, how did we ever think that was a good idea?
Yeah.
And he's just like, personally, I'm glad and I'm encouraged that you guys failed so miserably, that you failed. Bad ideas should die a death, right? They should just be dead, die a bad death. And he says, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful in that, and you should be too. And Syllable basically looks at him and she's like, well, if it takes 1,000 years, I swear we will endure and erase you from existence.
And at this point, it would take another 900 years to talk about that specific future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he says, that's the spirit. Just what I love it. I love this shit. He's like,
yeah, I mean,
oh shit.
Yeah, all I had to say was that it is funny that there is a bit of a humor within this Nimrod Sentinel.
Yeah.
Even though it is a machine, it's like, oh shit, even they emulate human things. It's weird.
Yeah,
It gets real weird.
Yeah, it does. And so then Omega is basically saying like, hey, this is bad news though. Today ain't that day, bitch.
Yeah.
All right. You're going to tell us what we want to know. And if you found it, why you did it and all that shit. And she's like, do you think I would do that? And Omega tells her, yes, people betray their own kind all the time. I assume that the standard interrogation protocols failed, and the humans are basically saying like, yeah, we tried, but she was bred to withstand that. What are we gonna do? And he says, it might not work, but I want to give her a bath. And this is the second time we've alluded to this, or they've said this thing called a bath. And he says, see what comes out in the wash. And then Nimrod the Lesser's like, yes. And
a great second bath. Syllable, you will be bathed in our what is it, the green goo that they have, because they're trying to extract all the whereabouts of other mutants, all the information that they know. Oh yeah, Syllable, you'll be trapped in a tube with green goo.
And if you somehow survive, you'll face the Undertaker in a casket match.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute, player. So then Omega's like, maybe that might work. The AI this AI is young and still learning, and getting out the data will give us maybe a window of recovery. You can learn what you need tomorrow or decades from now when the information is useless. Are you sure? And she's like, the human is like, what else are we gonna do?
Yeah.
And so Nimrod's like standing behind there, and he's like, yeah, please let me do this. She's like, fuck. Omega's like, fine, have it your way. And so he says, excellent, prepare the subject.
Yeah, I mean, dude, this shit's weird. It gets stranger with this Nimrod Sentinel. Like, he's like in jubilation that he gets to torture Syllable, the traitor mutant. He's like, oh yeah, all right. rubbing his hands like fucking Birdman when he's walking through that gif that everybody knows.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man, but it's just weird that he shows excitement for fucking a machine.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It is weird. And so then they're basically just loading her up, and they're getting her ready, and it shows his face, and he's just like, it literally looks like he's pinching his nipples right now, or like rubbing them. He's like,
we're gonna torture. Feels good, man.
It feels so good all over my body. So then he says, I am so sorry for what I'm about to do to you. I am just so higher powered and everything. And he's like, basically he's explaining this thing. He built this repository, a monument to understanding mutants. And he says, sometimes it's got a biological cost. And when you add that to your, unwillingness to do this, we gotta do this. We gotta do it. It narrows our options down. So he says, soon all these chambers are going to be full of your mind. Your bodies, and more importantly, your minds will be submerged in femto fluid, where you will be suspended and distilled down to nothing but data.
That is fucking strange. I mean, that is like nightmare fuel for like a dystopian future, is that if your DNA can be broken down into minutia for data, and possibly even extracting all the information within her mind, like fucking A, dude, that is That is scary as fuck.
Yeah, and he's going on to further explain that it's curated by an AI of his own making, his very own brood. Unfortunately, for one of mine to flourish, many of yours must perish, including you. So as you fade away into nothingness, do try to find it in your heart to forgive me.
How could you? How could a mutant forgive this fucking Nimrod, this insulting, this condescending fucking Nimrod?
That is such a fucking baller thing to say, though.
Yeah.
Oh, as you die into nothingness, please forgive me. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. Like, oh man, that is such a baller ass move right there. And so then she's pissed. Syllable's just, oh, you think that threatening me is going to make me tell you what I want to know? Like, I'm not afraid to die for what I believe in. And so then Omega says, hey, you know what? It's good that you're willing to die for a cause, because, you know, causes, though, they have seemed pretty fatal for your kind, essentially. And unfortunately, while this is a kind of death, it's not one you can escape from. And it shows her in the thing, and she's just fucking toasted, basically. And then it talks about the kennel, which is the Sentinel mutant breeding camps. And it talks about how the Salsen kennel was the pinnacle of man-machine ascendancy's breeding program to produce hounds. And hounds are basically mutants bred in captivity to hunt other mutants. They were basically meant to generate fear and sympathy in their intended target. And then they abandoned them after some generations because they became broken and dependent. They were ineffective hunters. So modified versions they made, like the final ones, which were, syllable basically, they were recreated with unreadable black brains and conditioned for insurgence and duplicity. So few of them were successfully deployed. They were very lethally effective. The majority of them, since, they were basically bred to betray people, they defected and then they supported their own kind. They supported their own mutants, basically.
Yeah, so she's served both purposes. Not only is she in cahoots with the mutants because those are her people, even though she was created by the man-machine
ascendancy, yeah.
The Alliance. She also betrayed them and caused their downfall. But they also mentioned that Sinister created a counterpoint to the Hounds, which was the aggressive, more proactive mutants, which was Rasputin, the one that got multiple powers and Omega level threat powers.
Yeah, and so basically says that so that kennel was destroyed 10 years ago, along with all the data and all the genetic material and everything. So it's toast. Now we get into the No Place hub,
which is something that was introduced in House of X. They talked about the 3 different seeds. One being allowed you to go through a portal to end up somewhere else. The second to create a Krakoan environment, and the third, which was specifically for this nowhere place.
Yeah, which they said don't go to. They were like, don't ever go there. And so now here we are. There they are. They're literally upside down in the panels. Rasputin, Cardinal's basically just saying hey, I wish I could do this. I wish I could have fought, but I just can't. I'm not capable of violence. And I would trade places with her in a heartbeat. And Rasputin basically tells him dude, she was gone by the time I was fighting him. Gone. You watched. And right now, I think I would take your trade, priest. I would fucking trade you in for her in a heartbeat. And so then they flippity flop back into Krakoa through another portal. And someone off screen or off panel is saying, hey, we saw that there were only 2 of you in the transit. What happened? And she says, Percival's dead. Syllable probably is too.
So Percival is probably the first mutant that was getting killed, while the other 2 were trying to work on the Sentinels that were attacking them, and then also along with Syllable.
Yeah, and so basically we see essentially 4 characters on screen. Wolverine, someone who's wearing shit like Magneto. I don't know if it's actually him or not.
I think it is, and I don't know how, in what regard, the Krakoan greenery or organic stuff is... He now has a green costume for some reason, which I don't remember, but there's also 2 other figures that look like the Groot race, and I don't even know who the fuck the person in the corner is, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought this was some kind of a Groot guy over here, this plant dude. And so Wolverine's just basically it's too bad. They were both good fucking soldiers, and did they die for nothing, or was it worth it? And Cardinal says, well, we got it. And Wolverine says, all right, well, follow me. The old man's waiting, which I'm assuming the old man's got to be Charles or someone to that effect. Then it goes on the page to talk about the surviving mutants, and it kind of explains more about there were two mutant populations under this man-machine supremacy. The current estimated number of surviving Homo sapiens superior, which are the mutants, is believed to be less than 10,000. The vast majority of them are transplants or refugees that no longer living on Earth or in their native solar system. The two main colleges, there's two main colleges in the Shi'ar space. The first was Benevolence, which was a transit station that was on the fringes and was kind of a buffer between the Shi'ar Empire and the wild space. They put them over there, and there's 8,000 living there. And then the second colony is in the Shi'ar throne room or throne world of Chandalar. Then there's like 2,000 or less mutants who are there. And by a treaty, they're basically being bred as warrior stock for the Imperial Guard.
Yeah, so I think they've kind of negotiated their own safety and basically being like warhounds for the Shi'ar Empire, which is something that's already been explored with the X-Men, that's currently being explored with the X-Men 97 series.
Yeah.
That Charles curried the favor of the Shi'ar Empire because he developed a relationship with the Queen, and that's clearly something that's played even now with the Dawn of X, which is something that started I think in 2019, but still applicable to the current X-Men continuity.
Yeah, and basically, it's basically saying that the Shi'ar Empress has always wanted to conquer the Sol system, which is our solar system, and she's basically going to use the mutant guardsmen as sympathetic conquerors to take over.
Yeah, because it's either that or the humans are going to fight Man Machine and possibly lose. So it's like, well, this is the best we can do, and we were already kind of allies with them anyways. So
yeah, it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend at this point. Like they want to take over. The man machine supremacy is pretty fucking baller. So like, I don't know if the Shi'ar could even fucking maybe take them.
Yeah. So I mean, if anything, what would happen is that maybe the mutants claim Earth again, or maybe just the solar system at large. Best case for them. But it's under the dominion of the Shi'ar Empire.
Yeah, basically. And so they're basically saying that all the mutants that living in the Sol system are citizens of Asteroid K. And now that the X-Hound Syllable and the Ghost Percival are dead, the now population is 8.
Which is probably Magneto.
Yeah, it's probably the 4 of those guys, and then them two, so 6. And there's probably 2 more that are there. Yeah. Well, obviously there is 2 more that are there that we haven't seen yet. Then we go back to X3, the X-Men, year 1000.
Yeah.
All right. And so there's this, this being.
It's Syllable, but she's disintegrated. Because remember they said.
That's right.
Yeah, they're like, well, it'll take 1,000 years for whatever that remark she said. It'd be 1,000. Well, here we are, 1,000 years into the future.
Yeah, and so she's in there, and he says we are losing them, and that's what he says, and says this is the archive of Nimrod the Greater, the mutant library,
and this is a juxtaposition of Nimrod the Lesser. So in 1,000 years, I imagine he is ascended in rank, or this is the next evolution of the man-machine alliance.
Yeah, and now we've got basically this blue person that we saw in the X-1000 or the 1,000 years at the beginning of the book. And this thing's talking about that there's too much machinery floating around inside of here and not enough soul left to save or even copy. And there's this floating machine guy, and he's like, "Oh, the blame is not yours, librarian." I feel like that's how he talks. Like that's got to be his voice. He's like some weird British guy. And he says, "Oh, it's my fault. I wasn't able to maintain this ship for a fucking millennium. Jesus Christ." And she says, "Oh, it's no one's fault, Nimrod," implying that this is what's left of the Nimrod. Yeah,
so maybe there's even a far greater species or race that ended up surpassing even the man-machine, even mutant species.
Yeah. And so she says, "You did exactly what you were made to do. You created a collective consciousness of mutantdom, a living database of Homo superior, in order to provide a tactical advantage in a war. Who could have known how pointless and useless that war would be? Who, at the time, could have seen the surprising end of the human machine mutant war? And then he says, Homo sapiens. And he says, so good to be done with all that. And so now they're in like that. I'm assuming it's that city or whatever.
That futuristic city, yeah.
And this being is saying, are we done with them? Can we ever really be done with the past? After all, that's what a legacy is. And they're at some place called the Preserve.
Yes.
And she says, this is why we keep dinosaur bones around. So I'm assuming this is the Preserve is the place where they keep either what's remaining of the mutants and human populations, basically like a zoo, essentially, or it's just to keep it alive so that it exists.
Yeah, I that's the one thing I couldn't understand about why they would keep it around. But then again, if we think about our own history and the fact that if history gets erased in some way, that we are doomed to repeat the past.
Yeah.
So in order to prevent a possible scenario where this is revisited again, they have, I don't know, man, this shit made me uncomfortable because once they get to the Preserve, they show these two biblical figures that appear to be something like Adam and Eve in a primitive state. It's weird.
Yeah, and so that's what this being is saying is like, as a reminder of what this world used to be like. That's why we're keeping this, and to remember what we overcame. It's important to keep a record of the great sins of history. Even better to preserve a remnant, something to point at, and hope to God they never have dominion again. And that's when it shows this Adam and Eve type character in this. Essentially, this is the Garden of Eden.
It just sucks though, because it's like, as far as the mutants have come, that like in the first couple pages, Moira talks about the caged beast, and that's like that they ended up like a fucking caged beast. For as advanced as the mutant race became with their like essentially godlike powers, that by the end of 1,000 years into the future, that they too became like captive animals, and that shit sucks.
Yeah, it does. It's fucking brutal.
And that's just the first issue, dude.
Yeah, that's just the first fucking issue. And so now the next issue we're going to be doing for the next episode, but just to say, is will be House of X number 2. But man, so far this series has been excellent.
I gotta tell you, like, shit, man. Can I tell you like what my favorite issue is in House of X without actually telling you anything? Like,
yeah, tell me which one's your favorite.
All right, House of X number 4 is like, that shit is a banger fucking.
Oh man,
it's one of my favorite ones. Yeah.
All right, well, I will keep that in mind and see if I agree with you when we get to House of X number 4, which is.
All right, hold on. I'll say that House of X 4 and 6 are neck and neck as far as being my top ones. But
all right. Well, we'll see when we get there if I agree with you.
Yeah, but what do you have to say about the two things that we've read so far?
Oh, it's fucking great. This series is excellent, and like I said, I've never read this series. Yeah. I've read a lot of comics and shit, but like you definitely have me beat on the level of shit that you've read.
I don't know that much, but I know enough.
Right, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe you're not an expert, but you know more than I do. So, for all intents and purposes, you're the expert on the show.
Okay.
So, but I fucking have enjoyed this thus far, and I mean, we're only 2 issues into this 12-issue run, and man, I'm already like, we've already basically seen the beginning and the end
of the X-Men.
Of the whole thing. Now I'm curious to see what happens and what transpires in the middle of this.
Yeah, and the crazy part is, dude, this is all done like within the first 2 issues for both things, or rather the first issues of each thing, in 43 pages or 42, whatever the amount of pages, man.
Yeah,
you got a bitchin' story on both ends, and it only gets better from here.
Yeah, which is pretty fucking awesome, and I can't wait to keep reading this. This is I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad that we decided to put effort back into the Panel to Panel podcast.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm glad you picked this as the first thing we read.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna say that nothing else matters after this, because this is the only way I want the X-Men to exist in my mind, is that what ends up happening at the very end, that is the what do they call it? The swan song?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That is the swan song of the X-Men. There's nothing else beyond this. This is how I want to remember the X-Men because I haven't touched fucking. I read beyond that. I read like X-Men when it rebooted, and I'm just like, this isn't matching up to what I read in these fucking 6 issues each of these 2 miniseries. I'm like, this isn't where I wanted it to be, but I'm just gonna remember it for these 12 issues. So
Yeah. All right. Well, good enough. And I will remember it too for this. So, anyways, well, that pretty much ends it for us, I guess. You got anything else you want to say?
No, I guess just stay tuned, and hopefully if you enjoyed these last 2 episodes of us kind of breaking down and just talking about what we enjoy or just analyzing shit about House of X and Powers of X, stick around for more, I guess.
Yeah, and I do think it's relevant to, what's currently going on in the Disney Plus series, the X-Men 97.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing that some of these things play out a little bit in there.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, I'll save that reason for when we end up reviewing episodes 5 and 6 of X-Men 97.
Yeah.
I'll explain why House of X, Powers of X is somewhat applicable to X-Men 97. So
excellent.
But if you want to know why that is, you're gonna have to tune into fucking Game Rage
movies and TV.
So please stand by for that, and we'll let you know on the reels and on the socials. But yeah, be on the lookout for that this coming week.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you did want to find out about this stuff on the reels and the socials, you can go to @GameRage Magazine on Instagram/TikTok and @GameRageMag on Twitter if that's your thing. You can also go to All Gas No Trash Official if you want to see spicy memes. Adam does spicy memes, but mainly the spicy memes come on Game Rage anyways.
Yes.
So, but if you want to hear music related shit, go to Adam. All Gas No Trash Official, and go to GameRageMagazine.com to check out all of our other shit. So, anyways, I guess that'll be the end of it. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace out.
That was Panel to Panel, the Game Rage Magazine comic book podcast. Thanks for listening. If you want to know more and follow along, go to Instagram and TikTok. Follow @Game Rage Magazine. If you want to follow on Twitter/X @Game Rage Mag. Tune in next time.